Alrighty, hey everybody, welcome to week 2 of this week's material. If you need a refresher on what the heck we learned last week and kind of some key things, I have a 5-minute rundown of all the lectures from last week in 5 minutes in a previous video. So if you need any assistance with that, check that out. Use the FAQ in our Moodle course shell, or just email me if you have any questions. This week, we are going to delve into one of my favorite things of all time, which is research. I just love research so much, and it kind of is a little bit sucky that we have to encounter it in our second week together because you guys are just getting a grasp on what the heck sociology is, and then we're going to throw in all of the research stuff that's attached to sociology, and there's quite a lot. Like literally, you could take what we're learning today and extend it out into like 3 semesters worth of classes. So there's a ton of material on here. Some stuff I'm going to get super in depth with. I might go on a couple of rants just to forewarning. And then other stuff I'm going to kind of just gloss right over because at our level we don't really necessarily need to know that. I just get so excited for you guys to learn more about sociology and kind of see how you guys connect into it. So within this week's video series, we're going to learn what research is. As I kind of talked about last week, how sociology is a science and we haven't really escaped science. We haven't escaped research either. So we're going to learn in particular what sociological research looks like. We're going to be introduced to the scientific method. If you're like me, you've been experiencing the scientific method since elementary school. We're just going to kick it up to the college level a little bit and kind of examine that. This will also unlock the journey that you guys are going to be partaking with your research project this semester, and more on that at the end of this lecture series when I talk about what's going on this week. And then finally, we are going to be learning about ethics because nowadays you can't have research without ethics. So we're going to be talking about some pretty disturbing, unethical experiments for a part of our time. We're going to be watching some videos that might make you uncomfortable, just a little bit of a heads up about that. But we also are going to learn about why having these ethics and these rules in place are so important, especially regarding sociology. If you haven't noticed yet, sociology deals with people, so you got to be able to treat people like people. And we didn't do that in the past as just a society. So that's why it's super duper important. So that's basically what we got going on this week. So our first kind of question that I have for you guys, kind of similar to how I asked what sociology was last week. And with this week, it's what even is research, right? And we actually conduct research every single day of our lives, whether or not we know about it. So there's this thing called Google. If you have a phone, if you're ever like looking up something, that's considered research. If you're looking up a definition for something, looking up what actress or actor is in this movie, and you're trying to figure out exactly where you've seen them before, or if you want to hear the name of, if you're trying to figure out what a song is, some phones can just automatically figure it out because they're always listening. And we also conduct research when, say for instance, you want to try a new restaurant or you're going to someplace new, some attraction, and you want to read the reviews to make sure it's worth your time or not. We also do research there. Some other ones is when you're asking for other people's opinions about something, like, oh, well, should I go with this decision or not? Or if you're just people watching and you're just gauging how people are behaving, that's also research. Or even stalking someone on social media before a date, right? Just to make sure that they're not a serial killer, to kind of make sure that, especially if you're meeting on some type of app, that maybe they're a little bit different, might be catfishing you, that kind of thing. Definitely want to make sure that you're staying safe as well, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do research, but there's a lot of issues that come up with this type of research too, right? For instance, the people who are giving, usually on different like Google reviews or Yelp reviews or things like that, it's the people who have a grudge against something, right? And the people who have a poor experience are more likely to conduct a review or just to post a review on something, rather than the people who have good experiences or okay experiences or fantastic experiences. It's really, really nice people who give the 5 stars and really talk about their experiences, unless they're being paid, which is another issue that might come up too with these different types of research. For instance, if you go on Amazon or something like that, you yourself might have gotten the offer where like you get a $10 gift card if you leave a good review or whatever. That's an issue because that's selective and that's biased. So there's a lot of different things that can come up with this type of research. So we also want to see what we want to see. So what we're seeing might actually be inaccurate, and in addition, what we're seeing might protect our own interests as well. Because as humans, we like to kind of just protect what we know, and we're kind of scared of the unknown. So anything that goes against what we want to see or hear, we kind of just ignore it. Which is why being a sociologist is sometimes difficult at some point, because we have to, as we'll learn, this is a Weber concept, we have to put away all those biases and have something that's called value neutrality, where we have to take away our biases. We have to take away that innate wanting to protect our own interests in order to see the truth that's actually occurring within research. And it can be something that's incredibly hard to do, especially when you're doing, for instance, like an analysis on discrimination. You don't want to see discrimination occurring anywhere. However, sociologists will have to be like, yeah, that's definitely occurring. Or if you're specifically trying to fudge your information and your data for it, that's not what sociologists want to do. That's unethical, which we'll learn later on in this series. So being able to put aside your biases and want to find what you want to find, and just let the research and the data tell its story can be extremely difficult too. So, but in non-scientific research, there's a lot of issues, and then in scientific research, there's a lot of issues too. But we have ways to cover ourselves and to definitely check to see whether or not our research is being conducted accordingly. So in our everyday lives, we are basically bombarded with data every single day. It could be the ads that you're hearing on the radio, or if you're watching something, or if you're listening to something. It could be in the media that you're consuming, and I'm really excited in a couple of weeks when we get to our media chapter just to see how much media you guys consume. But there is just so much data that we are being bombarded with, and our brains have to try to figure out how to sort it. So some stuff we ignore, and then other things we kind of like hold into ourselves. And these are just a couple of the things that you might be bombarded with. You always hear about that 9 out of 10 dentists agree or really like this product. In my family, we have a running joke about, well, is coffee good for us this week or is coffee bad for us this week? Because there always seems to be a study that says, well, coffee causes all this terrible stuff that happens to you, and then the next week they turn around and be like, well, coffee is actually super good for you because of these reasons. So that's a lot of data that's going out there too. And then, for instance, regarding Warren Shannonbrook, he had a baseball hitting average of .000, which if you're a baseball fan, you know that really sucks, right? So that's data right there. However, we have to be extremely aware of all the data that we're kind of consuming, because we don't want to get, as Jax Films famously says, bamboozled. So these two facts over here, and my pointer does not show up on here. No, okay. Well, the ones on the left-hand side of your screen right here, there we go, about the moon, and then the one right here about listening to stuff, those are actually fake facts. Jax Films does this series every so now and again where he and his fans create fake facts to try to bamboozle people. But sociologists do not want to get bamboozled. Similarly, we have to think critically about the data that we are encountering. So for instance, with this Warren character, Warren only played one game. So that's why he has this terrible hitting average, is because he only played one game. He was like 0 for 2. So in his 2 appearances, he didn't get anything. He also wasn't, if I remember correctly, an actual Major League Baseball player. So he was kind of pulled off because they needed somebody way back in the turn of the century, and they kind of just needed him, and then he decided to go back to his job. So I might be confusing my people, though. I'll have to double check on that one in my notes. But my main thing is that we have to be able to sift through as sociologists, and even just as ourselves, be able to sift through this data to make sure that we aren't getting, as Jack says, bamboozled. So, and then this kind of leads into another study, thinking about bamboozlement, right? So there was a study that came out that said that an empty backpack gives as much effective protection as a parachute when jumping from an aircraft. So when you're jumping from an aircraft, usually if you're skydiving or whatever, there comes a point where you gotta pull the cord and whee, however, an empty backpack, because of the weight distribution and everything, can also lead to that same result. Yep, this is an actual study. Totally true, and you want to know why? Because the airplane was on the ground and you only had to jump 3 feet. So just because the study says, oh yeah, it's definitely safe, an empty backpack, 100%, you're not just going to dive out there with an empty backpack on, hopefully, like, no, oh my gosh, that'd be terrible, but no. It just so happens that they were just seeing how much protection an empty backpack would give when you just jump off like that. And of course, a parachute and a backpack or whatever else you have on your back is going to provide the same protection, because you don't really need protection when you're just jumping off from that little bit. So it's important to be able to sift through research, to think critically about all the data that you're kind of coming into contact with. So critical thinking is kind of the key skill for this week that we'll be examining, and what we'll be examining with our research project this semester too. So, like I've been saying, us sociologists, we will not be easily swayed, we will not be easily bamboozled as the rest of society, but how can we do so, right? That's because sociologists are constantly evaluating the data and just information that is around us, especially when it comes to research. If you're ever given the opportunity to see me and my mentor from Lake State go to a same conference, like, because the sociologists have conferences where we present our research and we listen to other people's research, he and I will literally sit in the back corner of a room and just evaluate people's research and just totally tear it to shreds. Because he and I are constantly evaluating the research that's going on around us. And that's just how he and I's brains work. And so one of the things to note is that sociological research in particular is empirical. This is one of the things that I absolutely love about sociology. We have such a high regard for our data if it's done properly. So, and we have many different ways of avoiding these different issues that we've kind of explored in the past few minutes here. So one of them is that in order to observe things empirically, we have to kind of create our assumptions based on controlled systematic observations in the real life, right? So experiments in the laboratory are great. They enable us, as we'll see in 2 videos from now, I think, how good they are for things, but that's not actually within society. We actually have to conduct our observations in order to be able to apply it to other things within the real life. They have to be systematic. We have to have some type of system and a checklist, so to speak, of what exactly we're looking at. We also try as sociologists to see how much support does an explanation or this data have, and there's many, many different ways of doing that. For me personally, I usually conduct statistic analyses on things in order to make sure that things are the way that they are. However, I of course can't run statistical analysis all day. That's where that critical thinking and critical reading comes into play. I'm able to dissect articles, scholarly articles that have been published, and because of my knowledge of statistics and my knowledge of research, I'm able to read through the results of that article and try to figure out exactly if the things that they're testing with are what they're testing, and if the things that they say are a result of this testing, if they're actually being able to describe the data the way that they're supposed to be doing. Most of the time, they're not, which is kind of unfortunate depending on the quality of the journal. So that's one question that sociologists also always have, is how much empirical support is there? And this also gets into an analysis of what's called reliability and validity. And my psychology folks out there might have a little bit of an inkling as to like what reliability and validity is. And we'll get into these concepts a little bit later on in 2 videos from now when we go over research designs. But basically what it means is with validity, we're asking ourselves, are we measuring what we think we're measuring? Right? Are we on target with that? As you can kind of see in this graphic here. When we have a lower validity, we're kind of hitting the target, but not necessarily where we want it to be. With reliability, that means we're getting the same results each and every single time we conduct our survey, we conduct our test with that. So we want things to kind of end up in the same area. We're basically examining everything's in the same spot, however, it's not right on target. So it could be, for instance, when you're weighing yourself on a scale, it could be that you get the same weight of that scale every single time, so that's reliable. However, the scale's counter might be off, so it's not valid because you're not actually measuring your actual weight. There's some kind of dysfunction that's going on with your scale. So what sociologists in their research, and basically all researchers try to implement, is results that are both reliable, so we're getting that result every single time, as society is staying the same. Obviously, when society changes, it's going to be a little bit different, but and then something that's also valid, so we're measuring what we are actually measuring. Like I said, these terms will come up later on in our time together. So we're actually going to cut it there because I'm almost at my 20-minute mark, but what we'll be kind of continuing onward into how to exactly do sociologists evaluate research in our next video when we talk about the scientific method. So basically in this video we learned what research is, basically the collection of different what we call data, or just different information, and we're able to sort that out into a comprehensive kind of description of what's going on. We also are starting to understand some ways that sociologists are evaluating research. That's through being able to think and read critically about the data that's around us, especially thinking critically like, does it actually make sense? Maybe not. And that goes into the discussion of validity and reliability. And then next up, we're going to have the scientific method, and then we're going to go into research design and ethics. And I'll have a couple of videos that I did last semester on a couple of my research projects that are going on. If you're interested in them, those are totally optional to listen to or look at, I guess, because I actually go through some of my data just to kind of see exactly what a whole entire research project looks like. So that'll be it for now, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time as we talk about the scientific method.